Thanks for coming. My name's Megan. I'm the Community Action Officer here at Gloucestershire Wildlife Trust. And today I'm just going to be doing a bit of a talk. I don't want to sound like it's going to be too formal, because it's not. And what I'm hoping, is that you can all get involved as well and have a bit of an input, because after all, we are talking about you and your communities. So when I'm talking about saving nature, what I mean is nature's recovery and putting nature back into recovery, which is obviously one of the biggest things we're trying to do here at Gloucestershire Wildlife Trust. But also sort of looking a little bit more on why nature's recovery is important to us as individuals and us as a community and, us as a species. What you can do on an individual level and a local level, and ways you can feel confident to go out and inspire other people to take sort of meaningful action for nature. So just a little bit of background. This is Gloucestershire. We're there in Gloucester, obviously. And we have sort of three main strategic aims at Gloucestershire Wildlife Trust. Normalising natural solutions to climate change, and you'll see that in our rain gardens and swales and things. More people taking action for nature, and stopping and reversing wildlife declines. Now, I think instantly people think where you fit in as an individual or as a community is in the middle, this more people taking action for nature. Whereas actually we want 1 in 4 people to take action for nature, because that is the target, 25%, that's the number where real change starts to happen within communities. And we need people involved everywhere. We can't stop and reverse wildlife decline if we don't have people on our side and we don't have people caring and understanding. And we can't normalise natural solutions to climate change if there's nobody that wants a rain garden, or nobody that's willing to, get involved and understand what a natural solution might be. So actually people fill every single aspect of what we're trying to do at Gloucestershire Wildlife Trust. We have around 27,000 members. I'm looking at our supported development team in the room, but I think it's around 27,000 members. We've also got around 500 volunteers. We're also looking at our a little bit more now. So they're all people that are on side, but 1 in 4 out of Gloucestershire, we're looking at 165,000 people, roughly. So that is why it's so important for us to put people into everything we do, not just the people-focused stuff, but every aspect of what we do at the Trust. And like I said, so why is nature's recovery important to us? This is a really dramatic example of all the things that nature's recovery can support. So we've got this really heavy pollution, what I call ecological desert housing estates and homes, where you've got, your astroturf and your paving and no trees and everything. And all of that factors into climate change, but it makes your house hotter, it makes everything more difficult, because you don't have the natural elements to work together to fix anything. So in an ideal world, everything will turn into this. We'll be able to breathe better, we'll feel healthier and happier. And doesn't that look so much nicer as a little cul-de-sac, to be full of green? And what you will notice, and there's some great sort of images that you can have a look at online, or get, if you felt like it, a thermal point and shoot temperature gauge, that your tarmac might be 35 degrees, your house could be 25 degrees, but that shade under a tree, that'll be 20, 18. So having that greenery around will actually help you be cooler when we have these really harsh hot spells. And it just makes life a little bit easier for everybody, I think. But also there are lots of studies, and I won't list every single one, that shows and proves beyond doubt that immersing yourself in nature and in greenery and in the wilderness outside does fantastic things for our mental health, and that's really important. And I think a lot of people will have discovered that they maybe hadn't previously during the lockdowns, when you were sort of given that one walk a day and you went outside and really that was your escape and your release. And I'm lucky that I've had that my whole life, but not everybody has. So I think it's really important that we focus on that. But even just inside, putting houseplant in your garden. And I think there's some studies that show offices that have lots of plants inside and greenery outside, their team are more productive than offices that don't. And again, I can't quote the study because I can't remember what it is, but there are ones that I've been reading about. So everything's connected, and you know, if we want to feel just overall better, I can almost 100% assure you, by immersing yourself in nature, in whatever way that means to you, you will start to see positive effects. So when I'm talking about people taking action and immersing yourself in nature, building your own relationships with nature, it can look a million different ways. For some people, you know, taking action for nature is going to be creating space for wildlife. So actually putting up some bird boxes, creating some ponds, that sort of thing. For others, it's going to be writing to your MP or your local council and, you know, advocating and going out on marches and doing that sort of thing, signing a petition at home. You know, you might decide you want to go everywhere on a bike, dye your hair pink, perhaps. You know, you could do any of that. But just, you know, maybe a bit of passing on your knowledge and love for wildlife and having that shared experience with others. I've put a hedgehog in there because they're gorgeous, but I think hedgehogs are a really, really good example of coming together as a group of people, as a community, and doing something to support. And we often use hedgehogs, A, because everybody loves them, but because hedgehogs really need communities to help them. They're really struggling, and I will talk a little bit more about hedgehogs later. So this is just some ideas, but obviously everybody has their own thing. So, you know, for me taking meaningful action might be me spending every single morning in spring and summer out surveying. I'm surveying moths, I'm surveying butterflies, I'm surveying bumblebees, birds, everything I can possibly do, because for me, personally, meaningful action is me collecting scientific data so that we can record. But for somebody else, meaningful action might quite literally be ensuring that on your lunch break, you take 5 minutes to step outside and listen to the birds. And that's the spectrum that we're working on, and it's a really hard thing to quantify as what is meaningful action. At the Trust, I think what we've established is, when I say meaningful in terms of what I'm trying to do here, as long as it has a benefit for nature, a benefit for people, and it's long lasting, it could be quite literally anything. And we've also got a fantastic project called Do One Thing that hopefully a lot of people will know about, and that is that sort of first step in taking meaningful action. And that could be making a bird feeder, it could be making a beeswax wrap, but that is a small change in your mindset or a small change in behaviour that will see this fantastic impact. So I'd be really interested to pass out to the group if anybody would like to share something that they feel they either are doing or could potentially pick up that to them is a meaningful action that you think, you know, from this sort of thing might be helping nature. So you don't have to, but it would be lovely to hear a couple of ideas.
I find like mindfulness walks out in nature where I'm starting to learn more about what's around me, like what are these birds and the trees and what's this insect. That helps me because then I'm learning a bit more and then can potentially take more action in the future.
Yeah, fantastic. Anyone else?
Being vegetarian or eating less meat?
Yeah, it's a life change and it will have a positive impact. Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else in the room?
Car sharing, recently carpooling.
Yeah.
That's using much less diesel.
Yeah.
To and from work.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, I think it's really important to, quite often we sort of separate climate and nature and the environment and wildlife, and actually everything is this big ecosystem and everything is working together. So, you know, to save nature, we have to also support the climate. To support the climate, we have to save nature. It's all interconnected, just like we are as humans. So, individually, going to just do a little bit about wildlife gardening, because I quite like showing the before and after of my garden. So, when I'm talking about ecological deserts, this was my ecological desert 5 years ago. Not as bad as it could have been. You know, that grass could have been astroturf. the trees that you see and the ivy growing over, that could have all been cut back. This could have been perfect grass that had chemicals poured all over it. So it wasn't as bad as it could have been. But over the years, and this has actually since changed, so I turned it into this. Obviously, that was taken in winter, this is taken in summer, so I've used that to my advantage. But it's a really good way, I think, of just showing all the different aspects of things you can do. You don't need a big garden. I mean, my garden, granted, is about the size of this room, and I'm really lucky, and that's why we are where we are. But there's just a few things that I've done that anybody can do with any space, and I really mean that. If you have a window, you can do something on that window, and that might be all you have. You might not have a garden, you might not have a balcony. You can always put something on, stick it on your window. So water and shelter are really important. Underneath, this was the first thing we did. So this is a tree called a Betula pendula youngii. It's basically a small weeping birch. They don't get that big, so they're great to plant in gardens because they don't grow to these huge sizes. And underneath that, I've got a log pile, and those logs they were cutting some trees down, not because they were ill, but because they were in the way on the cycle track up the road. So I just asked if they could cut some logs up for me, and so I took them into the garden. And I've created a log pile under there with a couple of ferns. Almost immediately it was full of little mini beasts and things, and this year we had a giant horntail female, and they are about that big. They look like sort of enormous hornets or enormous wasps, and it looks like they've got a stinger on the end that's almost 2 inches. It's not, it's an ovipositor where she lays her eggs, but they need dead wood to survive. So that was an instant habitat that I was able to create. But also what I've done, I hope you can sort of see that if you're looking from a video as well, is I make pathways through everything so that I can fully immerse myself in everything I'm doing. Because it's all good and well doing stuff for nature and, you know, making changes and doing stuff for the climate, but, you know, if you want to be able to celebrate and feel the benefit of what you're doing, it's not all about everything else. You have to involve yourself too. So I always recommend making space. You don't have to have this wild, unobtainable situation. You have to be able to get involved and, you know, look and see what positive change you've made. I mentioned water. I think in this photo there's 2, but I've now got 5 sources of water in the garden, all of different sizes. If you can do, back to hedgehogs, if you can do one thing for hedgehogs, is put water in your garden and put a means of escape out of that water, because that's really crucial, just giving them somewhere where they can rehydrate. And I've got different levels, so I've got a pond that's sort of dug into the ground. I've got a couple of trays that maybe admittedly I just couldn't be bothered to pick up, and now they're bird baths, and then I've got an actual bird bath. so that's the water aspect. And diversity, I think the thing with wildlife gardening, you're often told to stick with native species, and yes, native species are fantastic, but in our changing climate we have to also accept that sometimes there are non-native but not invasive species that might be really good. So I've got a Mexican orange that I keep in a pot so it can't grow and go crazy. That flowers almost all the way through winter, and insects are on it every single day. I've also got Buddleia, that's a non-native. I think it's sort of naturalised now, but that's a fantastic source for moths and butterflies in particular. I've got some bamboo that I keep in a pot so it doesn't go everywhere. You really need to make sure you're keeping bamboo in a pot. But that is a really good space. It's full of like dunnocks and other little birds that just like to, you know, have a look around and keep themselves busy. What else have I got that's non-native? That's kind of it. I've got some native stuff as well. We've got rowan that's fantastic. Last year, if you knew anything about waxwings in Gloucestershire, I was probably shouting at you about it because they were fantastic. They love rowan. There's hawthorn as well, lots of different things. So you just want to have that diversity. And what I'm really enjoying watching Gardener's World now is Gardener's World are even starting to say, yes, you can have this fantastic, beautiful garden, but if you have diversity and things that flower at different times, it's great for wildlife too. And that last section was something that they've missed. So that's a really good example of them inspiring and empowering their community, people that watch them. And soft edges kind of follows on from diversity, really, is not having these harsh lines. So I think if we went back to the photo of when I started, it was grass, fence, and then there was sort of a tree, and there was nothing that made it graduate up to that. Unlike what I normally do, I'm going to show you a really boring diagram now, which is this. Really boring, but it's quite good. So as you can see, this shows the number of species in relation to the structure of a woodland edge, or a forest edge as they call it. And this is a really good example of what we talk about when we mean increasing biodiversity. So you're increasing the biodiversity here by increasing either just the size or the species, probably, of trees, and letting some scrub go in, or pushing back and allowing things to grow in the undergrowth. And by doing that, you increase the number of species that are able to live in that environment. And that's what's so important, is, you know, you might have some species that they can't. It's not that they don't want to, but they can't live in that environment. And so you open that space for them. And we do that quite a lot on our reserves as well. So a good example is Sycamore Wood. If you go right onto the top and walk along the main ride at the top, I think it was, say last year, 2023, last year, we did some coppicing as a whole organisation. We all went out and did a bit of coppicing, and we did exactly this. So we were pushing some of the woodland back, and we were bringing it in with the use of dead hedges. So everything was coppiced, was put back, and sort of creating dead hedges and things. And you get this undulating thing. And then spring 2024, it looked like it had almost snowed, because the lily of the valley that wasn't really there has just come out of nowhere, and it was magical. You'd walk up and the wind would go, and all you could smell was lily of the valley. It was fantastic. And what it also did was allowed, you know, species that need that open space to move, like butterflies. They won't go through a woodland, they need an open ride. So it looked quite drastic, and while we were doing it, you know, you get that sort of feeling of, oh, we're cutting these trees down. But it's so crucial to have that edging, and you can see, you know, and it's really shown itself in a few months how worthwhile it was. But you can do the same in your garden, like I did, you know, just changing how you do things, and not mowing straight lines and everything has to be straight. And it actually looks, I think, a bit more landscaped and a bit prettier, a bit nicer if you've got these soft edges. So yeah, that's kind of all about wildlife gardening, really. Now, when we're talking about influencing and inspiring a community, there's lots of different things you can do. Obviously, you've got your neighbours, so your real hyper-local community, just chatting to neighbours. I do all the time, because when I moved in, the looks I got from my messy front garden, what I did was try and recreate a bit of a wildflower meadow. To do that, I had to let all the grass grow, and I had to pull it all out, and it looked horrible and it looked really ugly. Now it looks really pretty, but for the first 2 years it did look awful. And I was having lots of conversations, and actually in having those conversations, I've now got 4 or 5 people in my neighbourhood. I'm not going to get everybody, that's okay, but 4 or 5 people have started like knocking on my door because they've had a cool bird, and there was a kestrel that was injured, so we rescued it and took it off somewhere, and it was just building that connection. Actually, I don't think I would have spoken to them otherwise, realistically, so it was really nice to have that. You know, just in passing, oh, you know, have you seen this cool plant? Oh, the dandelions are flowering, it's December, that sort of thing. And then this is quite a good idea. I think most neighbourhoods, probably, most of the ones I've lived in, have a dashboard or a Facebook page or something where you can post, and that's a really good way. You can even sometimes do it anonymously, of just planting the seed in people's minds. So there's one where I live, there's about 50 different Facebook pages, but somebody posted a really nice clip of a fox just out and about at dusk having a nice time. And what was so lovely, I sort of opened it a bit nervous, because you never know the kind of comments you get on social media, and every single comment was positive because the post was positive. And it just sort of, I don't know, refreshed my sense of community of where I lived, and I felt so proud that people were really excited to have that. So that was lovely. And again, an example of that, I will never stop talking about them, was the waxwings, because every single person on Rodborough Common stopped. Every single person, runners with headphones in, there wasn't a single person that would walk past that crowd without going, "What are you looking at?" And then going, "Oh, can I borrow your binoculars?" It was just fantastic. It was really, really nice. And after that, I've then seen people walking and they've gone, "Oh yeah, are there any more cool birds up here?" And I've gone, "Yeah, there's a kestrel over there, let's go." You know, it's really nice. Obviously, I love all wildlife, not just birds. It's just that tends to be the thing that comes up in my topics of conversation. You know, like gardening, you can do things like plant sales. Another example, somebody in our cul-de-sac, she just pops a pot of seedlings out that she doesn't want, she's got too many, and just says 50p, and she donates it to a different charity every year, and that's a really nice way, and you know that all of those are going to be local, because where the cul-de-sac is, it's not just, you know, random people that are walking by. So it's a really nice way of doing things. But actually coming together and really galvanising your community. So at the moment, something that I am really hoping to support communities on is speaking to local councils and authorities and decision makers, and actually just giving you all the confidence to have yourself be heard. What that doesn't mean is I'm saying everything you say is going to happen. But if you come together and have the confidence and you care, you know, they might say, right, we're going to do some pushing back of this on the cycle track, and you know, you might feel confident enough to go, well, if you left a couple of trees, or maybe you could pollard that tree, you'd actually create this really nice habitat. And if there's a lot of you saying this sort of thing with confidence and you know, actually saying, you know what, I want to see this change, you'll be surprised at how quickly it will change. And you know, there's a lot that comes into just more than one person going, well, why are you doing this? I don't want you to do this. I want you to listen to me. Change that conversation, and instead, you know, would you like to talk? Can we have a walk and a talk? I'll tell you why I care, and that will have an impact. And a lot of councils at the moment are working on their biodiversity policies and their neighbourhood development policies, and all these policies that, to me, when I started learning about them, they were really daunting and really sort of overwhelming. But actually just by taking that step and saying, you know what, I want to hear more and I want to get involved, suddenly, the decision makers will go, oh great, there might be somebody else that might actually be able to help us, and it's not just us doing all the work, but also you'll feel that whatever happened, at least you've been heard and you've done something. So that's really, really important, and you know, you can live by that rule in your everyday life, really. But I think the most important thing about everything is just celebrating what you're doing already. I think there's quite an overwhelming sense of I'm not doing enough, or I don't do enough. I'm not out every day on a march. I'm not signing every single petition. I don't have a wildlife haven. I'm not, you know, caring for every single hedgehog I see. I'm not stopping for every bee. All of this sort of stuff, and it can get really overwhelming. But just taking a step back and saying, well, I'm doing something, I care, and I'm helping other people care. It's so important, so crucial. And I think Chris Packham has this fantastic saying of, we're all raindrops, but together we're an ocean. It's something like that. I'm not going to quote his exact line, but that was so powerful. And I think this is a really good example of our raindrops becoming an ocean, and luckily they're blue drops actually, which is this project that I'm working on. It's called the People's Nature Reserve. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it because there are some leaflets and you can talk about it later or have a look on the website if you'd like to. But this is essentially what we're trying to do here is show that if everybody comes together, we create these corridors for species to move between. Corridors are absolutely essential. You know, you can't have species recovery without corridors, hence why we've got this enormous treescapes project trying to connect woodland, and we're constantly talking about connectivity. And again, I'm not going to go into this too much, but I mapped out a couple of corridors that we've already created. This one obviously will either be able to have to swim or fly, where species can actually cross our county now. And before we had this, We didn't know that they could, and now we can prove that they could. And, you know, what we want to see is that to be completely airtight and there not to be a gap. This is just people's gardens, and this is only about 350 people's gardens, and there's a lot more gardens in Gloucestershire, we know there are. So you can already see how this seemingly small group of people have come together and made quite a massive change. So it's really exciting. So yeah, if you want to talk about that a bit more, absolutely you can, or you can look it up, but I won't dive in. What I will do though is dive into why corridors are so important and do a bit of species focus, and they're all pretty cute, so that's good. So bats need corridors. I'm not certain when we think of wildlife corridors we think of bats, because I think you tend to see them in one spot and they don't move very far. But there are quite a lot of bats. They have different roosts in summer and winter, and whether they're breeding or whether they're bachelors, so just boys that are just, you know, need to get out of the way basically. And so there's a fantastic roost of lesser and greater horseshoe bats in Woodchester, which is near Stroud. They move halfway across the county to roost when they're not breeding. They have to be able to get there safely. They have to be able to make that journey safely. You know, if there's a predator, they have to be able to escape that predator. They can't escape that predator if there's nowhere for them to go. So that's a really crucial thing. One species of bat in particular, the Bechstein's bat, they're pretty much centred to where we are and a bit further south. And if you have a look, it's interesting, if you Google Bechstein's bat population map, there's a sort of weird outlier that doesn't have any connectivity to anything else. You know, it's sort of, and that's where you might start to see things like localised extinction, because they can't, probably not with bats, but with other species you will, like adders, for example, really suffer with localised extinctions. The pine marten, they're a fantastic example here of when corridors have worked. So the Forest Dean and all that network means that they're doing exceptionally well, but that's also the reason why we lost them, because the woodland was gone. Obviously hunting contributed, but if the woodland was all still there, they would then, once the hunting was banned, start coming back down, and they physically couldn't get there. So we had to pick them up and move them. And they are doing exceptionally well, pine martens, and they are gorgeous. Beautiful, beautiful animals. Another mustelid, the otter, they need healthy waterways. They need to be able to travel up and down their waterways. They need the space. They can have up to a 20-kilometre range. That's pretty enormous. So we obviously need lots and lots and lots of healthy waterways. And they're not going to see the end of Gloucestershire. They're not going to get to the top of almost the top of the River Severn and go, well, actually, no, we're going into Wales now, better turn around. So we all need to work together for those species to do well. And, you know, they are reliant on us really looking after our waterways, because if the waterways start dropping, the fish and crayfish and their other food start dropping as well. And that's when we start to see declines and issues. And it's sort of this constant balance for them. To my heart, obviously, as I've said, I can't stop talking about birds. Swifts had a really, really tough year this year. Lots of stories of swift adults kicking eggs out of the nest because they knew they wouldn't be able to have enough insects to feed them. So they bail eggs out. And I think there's some other species, a few kestrels have done the same as well. They do pretty much everything in flight. So they're feeding in flight. And if there's no insects, they're taking all this energy and all this, and then they have to come back and give all of their energy to their young. They're not going to do that. Which is also a reason, try not to clean your swift boxes out. Because imagine you've done all this work, building this lovely nest, you go away for a year, come back, and you've got to do it all over again, and there's no insects on top of that. It's quite detrimental. But swallows, house martins, sand martins, they've all, again, had a really tough year because our insect year was so bad. But they need that corridor of flowering plants, because flowering plants is where the insects are, and that's why we need to try and do a bit more for them in terms of the pollinating. And if you have things that will flower at different times of the year, if the insects aren't out when our native things are flowering, at least we've got a bit of a backup. So that's something we have to start thinking about. Similar with bumblebees and with butterflies. Obviously they've had a really tough time, but you know, you'd like to see that theoretically in the future, who knows, the large blue could go from Daneway Banks all the way up to Winchcombe. But to do that, they're not a tiny little thing. They're not going to be able to fly from A to B. They've got to be able to stop and eat something. They've got to be able to stop and rest. And to have that, you have to have a food plant that they can actually deal with. You know, you might need to start thinking about whether you want to plant some wild thyme or some scabious in your garden if you're in the right area. And the same with bumblebees. They need to be able to stop. So I've got a winter flowering cherry in my garden, and it's full of bumblebees now. Really weird, but I tend to find that the queens come out and they cover the flowers. Two more examples. Dormice, obviously, arguably the cutest animal in the world, that snore and eat flowers. I mean, you can't really get much better. I don't know if you've seen the stories in the Forest of Dean. They've now created some sort of treetop walkways for them because they move in the top of the canopy. Now, if you've got an immature woodland that doesn't have any hazel or honeysuckle, you're not going to get dormice. If you've got a really fantastic pocket of woodland here, but all around it, everything's been coppiced and cut back, they're not going to go onto the ground and run. They'll get predated. And also, I think they're probably quite lazy and just don't want to. And you'll find if you hold a dormouse, it just wants to go up. That's what they do. They just want to be as high as possible. So a great way to support them is to have really rich hedgerows, so they can at least move through the hedgerows. So that's a fantastic thing. You know, if you've got loads of fences, but you've got a woodland on this side of where you live and a woodland on that side, try and get some hedgerows in. You know, try and talk to people. The Woodland Trust give away free trees for exactly this purpose. So that's a way that you can support dormice. And lastly, the hedgehog. Again, I will keep talking about these and I will keep going on about them because they're a fantastic way to get your community to get involved because they don't really have a fight or flight situation. If you go up to a hedgehog, they sort of just look at you and they might run away, but really slowly. So you can see them. And things you can see, I think, have an impact. They've had a huge decline. In the time I've been alive, they have declined 30% in rural areas, sorry. Or is it the other way around? I think it's the other way around. Yeah, 30% in urban, 50% in rural, which is really, there's quite a dramatic drop. You're getting lots of fences that are put right down to the ground. They can't get in and out. You know, if your fence panel breaks, you could just leave a little bit. You know, if your fence gets blown down in all the horrible wind, we've got great opportunity, actually, to dig out a hole while it's on the floor and then put it back up and encourage other people to do it. Bramble is fantastic. So that, you know, you have those big bits of really dense bramble. If you've got a bit, you know, as long as this room, you might have 5 or 6 hedgehogs hibernating in that, and that's the stuff that they need. If you've got loads of leaves that fall into your garden, don't pile them up and take them away, pile them up into a corner, and then the hedgehogs can use them. There's loads of things you can do, and it's really, really simple. It's really easy things that I think actually make life a bit easier because it takes the pressure off because the hedgehogs can have it, you know. If the birds leave a mess on the floor, put it in the hedgehog pot, the hedgehogs can have it. So they're a really good sort of staple species to focus on if you want to take that action and really start to species focus in your community. And also, you know, they're struggling big time on roads, obviously. I think most hedgehog records at the moment are from seeing them on the roads. So actually recording them when they're moving around, fantastic. And just getting people's awareness. There's a bit of a myth that they eat loads of slugs and snails. If they eat loads of slugs and snails, like dogs can, they can get lungworm and they can get really, really unwell. What they want is, you know, beetles and earthworms and things. And to have lots of beetles and earthworms, you need dead wood and you need healthy soil. So you see how it's all very connected. And to have all of that, you need a community that is consistent and, you know, a neighbourhood that is consistent. So I've done a lot of talking, and I talked about celebrating. So I'm going to do a couple of shout outs to a couple of people I've met since working here, an individual and a community that I just think are really inspiring. Every single person I've met is inspiring, every single one. But these two, these two examples are really fantastic. I get so excited when I talk about them. So this is Dee Dee. She invited me to have a look at her garden, and she has said that I'm allowed to talk about this, so that's great, and use pictures of her garden. And she showed me this, and it made me actually quite emotional when I read it, because I just thought it encapsulates Dee Dee and her partner so well. But this is a poem that was written by her friend's son when they went to visit. Can everyone read it? Or shall I read? I might read it out and try and use my poem voice to read it out. So it's called Shepherding Frogs. We visited my mum's best friend while I was very young. Her garden scaled 3 emerald tiers like giant steps in the Welsh unknown. And while we tended teenage buds as they prepared to bloom, Dee Dee mowed and Eileen steered the frogs that hid away from doom. And I just think, isn't that lovely? Like, you can just picture it, and it's nice, because my parents taught me this as well. One of you walks in front with a stick, like this, there's a demonstration, and the other one mows, and you actually see the wildlife move from either side. And we do all this talk about let it grow, let it grow, or let it bloom June, and no mow May, and all this stuff. But then we don't go, this is how you cut the grass afterwards, and that's really important. Still now, I've got 2 bits of grass that I haven't cut, because everything needs habitat. But just take a step to walk through. We do it when we go to sites that have adders, because no one wants to get bitten by an adder and no one wants to step on an adder. It's a bit of protection for both of us. You walk through with a stick, and everything just moves out of the way and you don't have to worry. But it's so crucial, and I just thought it really took what they're doing, that extra step, that not only are they creating habitat, but they're really thinking about when they have to make a change, because you have to cut a wildflower meadow back, you have to cut your grass, how to do it in a way that's going to have the least impact. So that was lovely, and it's just, their garden's just awesome. It was so much fun. We did a sort of mini BioBlitz and survey on it, and we gave up with how many species we found. We just stopped because I had to go home. It's just great, and they're a really good example. But they're not the only people doing this. This is just an example. There's so many people that I've met that are doing exactly this. And then when I talk about a community that's taking action, I'm going to talk about Bisley, because they are fantastic. So I met Leslie, who will, again, hate the fact that I'm talking about her in public. She's got a lovely hat on showing off her apple, and Martin. And they with the rest of the community, they've got this amazing allotment now. It's an allotment that's all wildlife friendly, chemical free. They've got a community composting scheme. This then ginormous space, probably 5 times this room of wildflower meadow, rich hedgerows either side, and a community orchard at the back. So you think, anything they could have done, they've done it already. And they invited me in to sort of give them a bit of support and guidance, and actually just help them really define what they're going to do and how they can measure the species improvement. So we had this big BioBlitz, and we surveyed all the sites, and there's this fantastic guy that's trapping moths there every year, so he's getting a consistent record. And we created basically a baseline of this is what you've got now. In a few years' time, we'll do the same. And theoretically, if all goes well, we'll, instead of having 72 different types of species, I think was our number, we'll have 100 and something, maybe. We'll see how good that gets. But this was the launch of their interpretation board. And it's just a fantastic example of when lots of people come together and they all care about something, and it works. It does work, and it might take some time, and it might feel like you keep getting hit by another brick wall and another brick wall, and it's not working. But I truly believe that sort of communities will conquer all. They will. Absolutely, they will do it. And there's a really nice quote, actually. Can I remember it? That I learned. It goes something along the line, so apologies if I've misquoted, but never believe that a small group of like-minded people can't change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And it is. If you look in history of when there have been these huge changes, it all started with either an individual or a small group of people. Absolutely. I mean, look at Gloucestershire Wildlife Trust. That's exactly what happened. Most organisations like us, that's exactly what happened. So yeah, we can do it. Absolutely, we can do it. So that's it. That's me from today. As we can see, we can change the world. The world is quite literally in our hands. We can make this change. And like I said, I'm going to be hanging around now so we can have a chat if you want to talk a bit more about the People's Nature Reserve. Or you can always just reach out, because my job quite literally is to listen to everybody and see what we can do to help and see what doors we can support and open for you. Because, I'm not going to come and tell everybody what to do, because what's the point? My idea is going to be different than yours. So the conversations and, my ears are always open to listen and hear what you have to say. That's it. Thank you very much for listening to me ramble at you all.